business idea. Squash blocks.
Yeah.
Amazon.com.
It's just two by cutoffs.
Yeah. I'll cut the lumber up for you.
Good thing we record this episode slightly in advance. It gives me time to get my patents in order before this goes live. Welcome to the Fine Home Building Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Justin, and I have Matt and Brian.
Hey.
Hey, Justin.
Hey. Hey, guys.
I guess you guys introduced Matt when I wasn't here last week.
Yeah, we did. It's amazing.
It's good to have you, Matt.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
We still have the podcast even when you're not here, Brian. You were on vacation.
I don't believe it. Nothing happens when I'm not here.
I don't know why I brought these papers. These are the wrong papers. I brought papers with me, everybody, and they are not the papers I need.
I've got papers. We've got plenty of paper.
We're really buttoned up over here. Anyway, today we're going to have some questions about open joint cladding, installing a load-bearing beam above the joist and somehow not supporting it at all, choosing between PVC and ABS pipe, and what to do with a decommissioned dryer vent. 4 questions. Let's get ready and let's just dive right in. What do you think? You got anything you want to share first, Brian?
No, I want to go right into open.
Brian has written O on the top of his page. Oh, is spelling something out. Open cladding. Open joint. It's like a game of Ouija.
Is it not somewhat of an oxymoron?
Open joint cladding. It's just open cladding, isn't it? The joints are open, as opposed to cladding joints that are tight, like clapboards.
But thinking of what cladding is intended to do.
Clad a surface.
Cover a surface.
Mm-hmm. Can I read the question first, or are you?
Sure. Yeah.
Question numero uno. I'm building a home in Northern California. Oh, this is from Joey, by the way. Hi, guys. I'm building a home in Northern California. Part of the home is going to have a cedar open joint rain screen. The home will be wrapped in 1-inch EPS foam with a WRB, that's the water resistive barrier, sandwiched between the structural OSB sheathing and the foam sheathing. My question is, do I need to worry about protecting the foam from UV light coming through the open joints of the siding? If so, how do you recommend doing this? Could I just paint the foam, use a secondary WRB rated to be used in open joint applications? Would having 2 WRB layers pose any additional problems? So you want to do some terminology clarification here?
Go for it.
Let's do it. So basically this guy's assembly is he has a wall framed, and then he has OSB sheathing on it for structural purposes. Over the OSB, he has house wrap. I'm assuming house wrap, some other sort of WRB. Let's call it house wrap. Then he has over the house wrap a layer of polystyrene insulation, so the white foam, EPS foam, 1-inch EPS foam.
Yeah.
That's a whole separate issue I just got. Okay. He's in Northern California, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's probably okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what zone he is, but if he's 3, he's good.
What have you memorized all the?
I think just having looked at that, I think that was okay.
It's fun when you just worked on something, right? And you're like, boom, you got the answers.
Yeah.
Give it a month and
It'll be
anything.
gone.
Yeah, you're not gonna know what foam is. So he's got a layer of foam over his sheathing and house wrap in between. But the siding is what we're really talking about here. Open joint cladding, or whatever you want to call it, rain screen siding, whatever. It's essentially, think of like a modern house. It's typically associated with the contemporary look of these modern houses. It could be vertical, it can be horizontal, it can be whatever. It could be panels. And it's essentially, there's visible gaps between the siding, and you're seeing through it.
Yes, it's not lapped like siding is typically done.
What is your complaint about that, Brian? So this guy's question essentially is, does he have to worry about the foam getting degraded by UV light, which we will answer.
Yes.
But before we get to that, let's pull out the soapbox.
I love I love the look of it. I've seen it done really well, and I think it can look dynamite.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a relatively new design feature on a home, and it's speaking to the fact that we have decided as architects, engineers, builders, whoever is deciding on the wall assembly, that our layers underneath the siding are good enough that we don't need siding.
Right.
We're going to let whatever gets in there.
And how did we get to that
in
point?
there. How did we get to that point? And is that a wise decision?
Well, we got to that point because building scientists have been chastising people for considering siding as a water barrier because it will not stop water. It doesn't matter what kind of siding you have. Some are leakier than others, obviously. I mean, vinyl siding is essentially rain screen open joint siding anyway. It's not visible open joint, but it'll let a lot of water in if under the right circumstances.
Right. You say that with such determination, but you could you
flip
could
this table
yeah,
over.
no, that's right. But you could just as equally say that lap siding will stop a lot of water.
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to stop
The
bulk
most
water.
of the water.
Yeah.
It will stop.
Yes.
So you could say that with you could throw the table over with that one
Yeah.
too.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. But water will get behind any of the sidings.
But this is saying when you open the joints, this is saying just let it in.
Yeah.
Open the floodgates.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Pontolilo has never been this mad.
I know about a detail that I love.
So this is saying let the water in.
Let it in.
Yeah. Well, let it in and let it out again though.
Perhaps.
But you're right.
As long as your next layers are actually keeping it out.
So what you're complaining about is that we have gone from the point of building scientists have said to us, hey, listen, guys, we've done the numbers, we've done the test assemblies, and we can tell you that no matter what siding you put on, you're going to get some water behind it. And what we have heard is, great, so siding doesn't need to stop water at all.
right.
Let's just put huge holes in it.
Despite the fact that some water gets behind some siding, we still have always taken the care to make joints tight, to flash behind, your vertical joints in lap siding, all these things to try our best to keep water out.
Well, but there are other building scientists who will tell you that the job of the cladding is to protect the sensitive layers underneath it. It's a physical barrier. It's two roles. One is aesthetics, obviously. You want your house to look nice. The second one is that it protects the stuff below it. It's cladding. It's like the armor for your house, But one of the things it's protecting against is UV.
But when did we decide that was the purpose? Because that surely wasn't the purpose when we were putting siding over the studs or over the
Surely
framing.
not.
It was to keep water out.
It was not. Yes, it was for water.
So when did we decide? When did we make the decision that that was the purpose of siding?
July 21st, 1992. It was a cloudy day in Burbank, California. I don't know when we decided, Brian.
Joe Stiebrick was on his second glass of wine.
Yeah, and he said,
and he pronounced
he said enough of this. He went
to
to
his building science groupies.
He went on his balcony and addressed the public.
Siding is a construct.
Yeah. Nevertheless,
let's answer the question.
Nevertheless, people are going to install open joint cladding.
Yes.
So it is our responsibility, Brian, to help them do it properly. Even though I think that you should not do it. I've seen some of these houses up close, and to me, it strikes me as an excellent place for bees to make a nest. So that when you walk up to the front door, you're going to get swarmed and destroyed.
Yeah, I wonder if he's putting any kind of screen.
How would you?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think they're just left open. I mean,
Just wide open.
Yeah, and what I was kind of doing a little reading coming in here, it was just like, these are considerations, and one of them was bugs and animals are going to get in there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm with you. I like the look of it. It's cool.
It
looks nice.
You can achieve the same look, and not that it's necessarily better for water, but it would be for pests. You could achieve at least a similar look with a shiplap
Yes.
and a big gap.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are systems where it just kind of gives the look without, I guess the potential drawbacks of one of these systems where, you are just opening it up to all kinds of stuff, not just water, but bugs and
You get a lot of ventilation behind there. I mean, that's so which is, I guess they've made a decision which is more important. Is it more important to keep most of the water out or to allow really good airflow and drying?
That's right. If it's just essentially outside behind your siding,
so then
essentially, then it's
I mean, what they're basically saying is the siding is no longer necessary to keep the weather out like it was when we were applying it over the studs. We figured out how to do it a different way, and now the siding has become decoration. So why not open it up to making it a decoration of any sort you like? And one of those things that they like is this open joint look where you see the black behind it. So, but then we got a whole separate issue. We got that. Okay, let's say he's going to do this. Forget the foam for a minute. because that's just another complicating
Joey,
factor.
we will get to your question.
Will.
We're going to get there.
If you want to do open joint siding and you want to use house wrap behind it, there are house wraps that are made to stand up to UV degradation. In fact, one of them just hit the market was Benjamin Obdike's product, Flat Wrap. We just saw it for the first time at the JLC Live show this year, Matt. Did you see it when you were there too?
I probably did, but it kind of like slipped my mind until, I just looked it up again and saw it there. And
it's kind of cool. It's just like a matte black house wrap, and there's no branding on it, which I thought was kind of a bold move.
So is this is part of their intention to be used in these applications?
That is the intention.
Exactly for that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer to when it becomes a problem, but there's some kind of threshold where the amount of open space you have compared to closed space. It's like how much sunlight is getting through and when do you have to worry about it. And I'm sure Benjamin Obdike can help you out with that because they were talking to me about it. I just don't remember the numbers.
Yeah, I
Do they
saw
have them on
that.
their site?
I didn't see it in their product specs, but for another product, the Delta Facade S, they say, I guess like it should be less than 40% open.
Okay.
So it'll allow gaps up to 2 inches in your open joint cladding, which is a pretty huge gap.
But that's the 40% would have to be dictated by the ratio.
The size.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had 4x8 sheets on there, which a lot of buildings do, with these giant panels with open gaps between them, which is also kind of a cool look. Anyway, so let me just run down the products. So we mentioned Flat Wrap, Benjamin Obdike. Matt mentioned Delta Facade. That's FASSADE. We'll put all these links up for you on the show notes, finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Tyvek makes a product, but I don't think you can get it in the U.S. I've seen it on their UK site, which is, by the way, also called Facade. So it's Tyvek UV Facade, but it's spelled differently, FACADE. And then Solitex, which is a Proclima product. You can get those at like 475supply.com, which is just, by the way, is a super cool website anyway. You should definitely go there and check out all the cool building supplies they have. We mentioned the Lunos HRV system last week when we were chatting. Yeah. They have those there. I think they're the only place in the U.S. you can buy them. Anyway, Solitex Fronta Quattro is another European house wrap that you can put up that's meant to be UV resistant. So those wraps can take sunlight. So you could use that.
Yeah, but also, I mean, he's talking about putting his WRB behind the foam. So this is a thing that would have to go on top of the foam.
Correct.
We haven't gotten to that yet, but
so now we're getting to the foam.
Yeah, that is going to be degraded by UV exposure. This particular stuff is, especially if it's not foil faced.
Right. And aside from that issue, there's also only certain foams that are allowed to be used as a WRB. Mm-hmm. Not every foam company will meet the quote unquote acceptance criteria to be qualified as a house wrap. So what's essentially going on here is that in the building code, they call for number 15 felt paper as house wrap. That is like the standard for whatever reason. I don't know, because if you talk to any manufacturer of felt paper, they'll tell you that it's made for roofs. And they have no intention of it being used for a wall. But for some reason, we've decided that it's also used for walls. And not only is it used for walls, it's our standard that we're going to make everything else the benchmark off of that. So what they'll say is you have to use number 15 felt. House wrap is an acceptable alternative as long as it's got, well, any house wrap is an acceptable alternative. I think it says in there now that plastic house wraps. But the thing is, you can use pretty much anything for a house wrap as long as it meets the same criteria. So there's something in the world of building called an ICCES, which is International Code Council. I think it's evaluation service or evaluation something. And what that basically is if a company has a product they want to sell and they want it to be able to be code accepted as an alternative for something, like let's say the code says you have to have felt paper. Well, this company says, well, I have a membrane that I want to use and I want it to meet code. So what they have to do is pay a lot of money and have a lot of independent testing done that verifies that product's acceptability as a code replacement, code equivalent. Maybe it's equivalent somewhere. I don't know what the hell it stands for, but ICCES. And so if you want to use anything else as a house wrap or in place of a house wrap, including foam, it has to have met. The company has to have bothered to do a test to see if it's equivalent, and not all companies do that. I think the last I heard, Benjamin Obdike products are not approved. I believe Dow is, but there's. You'd have to look at their specs, but the criteria that they all have to meet is called AC 71, and I think that literally stands for acceptance criteria 71. But basically, the foam sheathing panels have to pass several tests, including being doused with water, artificial weathering that includes exposure to sunlight for 10 hours a day for 21 days. Repeated cycles of baking in a 120-degree oven, followed by soaking in a bucket. I mean, it just sounds like they're just like screwing around, basically. But so if it passes this test, then you can tape the seams of the foam and use it as a WRB. Okay, so that sort of solves that. This is a multi-layered question, and a lot of builders do this. A lot of builders will sheathe the walls, put up foam, tape the joints, put up furring strips, attach the siding to the furring strips, and we're out the door. The foam is the WRB. So if nothing else, maybe you're going to take away from this, well, shoot, maybe I better check that the foam I'm using is actually accepted as a WRB. The other thing to consider is the expansion and contraction of the foam. If you're using it as a WRB, there's some people who believe that you should not trust it because it does move enough with expansion and contraction cycles that the joints can open up, and now you have a water-resistive barrier that has holes in it seasonally, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So a lot of builders just go, well, I don't want to worry about this. I'm going to put house wrap over the foam. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's totally cool. It's certainly easier to do that if you have... Was it you that hates these terms, Brian? Audi windows, innies and outies? So in energy for houses that have rigid foam on the outside, we talk about two different window installation styles, innies and outies. Innies install right to the sheathing, right to the plywood or OSB or zip system sheathing, the same way it does in any house, and then you put the layer of foam on, and the window is flashed to the wood sheathing, and then the foam just goes on over the top of it. So no big deal. Your WRB is behind it. The foam doesn't have to be a WRB. It's all fine. It's all good. If you do outies, then it's easier to have house wrap on the outside of the foam because then your drainage plane is in line with the exterior face of the foam because your windows have been padded out to be flush with the foam or on top of the foam with window bucks, and then your house wrap can go from behind the window flanges or over the window flanges and then down over the foam. And that's so. If
you put the foam out there, the WRB out there.
Yep.
How do you fasten it? Do they have cat fasteners that have long enough nails to?
Well, it depends on what kind of.
How thick your foam is.
Yeah. I don't know when you get up to extra thicknesses, what you do. It's an excellent question. I don't know a lot about installing. I've never been on a job where I saw somebody installing house wrap over the foam. But we have published articles where they've done it, but it wasn't a how-to. It was just like, here's the assembly we used.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that somebody makes fasteners that do it.
Yeah.
And I wonder if I have seen people do it when they do peel and stick over the foam, which would act as a WRB, and then you wouldn't need fasteners because you're sticking it to the foam.
Right.
Right. So I have seen that. And actually, I think Joe Stieberg did that on one of his projects.
Oh, yeah, well, I guess there's cat fasteners that are long enough to hold the foam in place. So it's the same thing, right?
Yeah. Yes. You're not adding much thickness with the house wrap.
Right.
So I guess you probably use the same cap fasteners.
Yeah.
Whatever you're using to attach the foam, use those. Well, some people hold. Well, because then you're going to put furring strips up over the house wrap.
A lot of times you're putting the furring strips up.
So that's doing a lot of lifting.
Right, and at that, but in those situations, sometimes people are just getting the foam up, kind of tacking it up there, temporarily because they know the furring strips are going to be,
which is what
secured,
you did,
with big timber locks or whatever, and that's really going to lock the foam into place,
right. I lost track of all the different questions I had in my head. So I guess what we're up against now is a double house wrap a concern. House wrap behind the foam and house wrap over the foam to protect it against UV. I don't think it's a problem.
I don't think so either. And I saw there was a kind of I guess, an analysis of different kinds of these open cladding systems. And they didn't really have any assessment of the longevity of any of these. They said they're kind of too new. But that sort of like double WRB, where you've got one in front and one in the back of the foam, is an accepted, I guess, method.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe you'd want to just choose, if you're gonna put the house wrap up, as we've already established, it may need to be a UV resistant house wrap. Maybe you choose one that's extremely vapor open. So that any water that happens to get behind it, if it's concerned, then you know that it can get out again. But I wouldn't consider it to be a huge deal. So that seems like the best solution if you're going to go this route. Interesting stuff. We're pushing in some new and uncomfortable territory with all these combinations of different assemblies and different products. And who knows, in 10 years if it'll be like, well, shouldn't have done that.
Yeah,
that didn't hold up to UV.
But as far as the importance of using UV tolerant WRB, like there was something on Green Building Advisor that I think I can't remember who wrote it, but anyway, it was looking at an assessment of various WRBs and how they performed after just the sort of like the amount of time that they're allowed to stay on the wall before they're covered.
Right.
And some of these were losing like 90% of their water resistance in that period. So,
right.
I mean, you really want to make sure that you're using something, because otherwise it's not it's a water resistive barrier. And if it's losing 90% of its water resistance, then it's not doing its job anymore.
Oh, it kills me to see some of these people that are like working on a slow addition remodel or whatever, and they put Tyvek up and then they leave it and it's completely bleached out by the sun, and then like the spring comes and you see them putting up the siding. You're like, your house wrap's not working anymore.
Yeah,
you need to put more house wrap on.
Right,
and you can put it on right over the old stuff actually. At least Tyvek used to approve that. I assume that they still do. Maybe something has changed, but yes. All right. Do we need to talk about anything else with that question?
He asked about the painting it. I don't know if you want
like that.
I don't really like the idea of that, but I mean, I guess you can use latex. I guess acrylic paint, go over it. I don't know if it's going to look like garbage or what.
This might be a Rob Go Nuts thing.
Yeah.
You want to paint it? Go nuts.
Well, I mean, we already talked. You're going to have to put the WRB on top of that if you aren't painting it, because it needs UV protection, because that foam will degrade.
One thing to consider here is that that we didn't mention, that's kind of peripheral, is that you might want to consider using a dimpled or wrinkly house wrap between the foam and the wood sheathing, just to provide a little bit of a standoff. And I know it's kind of counterintuitive, like, well, aren't I then letting cold air behind my foam? And like, yes, but the payoff, the safety payoff is more important than the slightest reduction that you're going to get in insulation.
Yeah. DuPont actually recommends not even taping the seams on the foam if you're using it in this application.
Oh, really?
They're like the R value drop is so minimal, it's not even worth it just to give the wall a little more openness so any moisture that gets in there can drain out.
Is that in all applications, or only if you have
They said whether you're putting the WRB in front of or behind the foam,
so basically,
don't tape it.
If you're putting foam up, you're putting our foam on the outside of walls, don't tape the seams.
That's their recommendation.
Really?
Yeah.
We got to go back to the paint for a minute, because I don't think you can go nuts.
No.
Because doesn't latex paint qualify as a vapor retarder?
I think you're right. It would be
everything's
a class
vapor retarder.
3.
So you could up the risk, right? If you had vapor barrier on the inside, and now you had tape seams and you're painting with latex paint.
Well, no, because house wrap is a vapor retarder too.
As is the foam, I think.
Yeah.
To the degree that latex paint is?
Oh, I don't know.
Because I believe latex paint is isn't it an acceptable interior?
Class 3
Vapor barrier?
Yeah.
Certain paint is.
Yeah.
That's which is why remember that guy we were talking to who had wasn't it Hazlitt who had or who was that? I can't remember who it was, who had the can of vapor barrier primer that he moved from job site to job site, even though he didn't use it.
Oh yeah,
and just pretended like that was what he was putting on the walls.
yeah. So that's downgraded from go nuts to go cautiously.
Yeah. Sorry. It's not as catchy.
It's not as catchy.
Well, all right. That was the whole show on that question. Let's move on to the next one.
I love this one.
John writes. Hey, Matt's going to need some time on this one. John writes, I'm a recent new subscriber and looking for information on installing a load-bearing beam. I'm removing a load-bearing wall, and instead of having a beam pocket in the area, I would like to place the beam on top of the ceiling joists. I envision hanging the joist from the new beam. Is this possible? Matt?
Short answer, no.
Well, maybe not as described, but it could just be that he's having a language. What is your concern with what he's suggesting?
The way I read it was he was going to take out the load-bearing wall, which is holding those ceiling joists, and put a beam on top of the ceiling joists, and then hang those ceiling joists from the beam, and he wasn't going to have any support on the beam.
Well,
he said somehow the joists were going to be supporting the beam.
He said instead of having a beam pocket in the area. Do you think that what he's saying there is instead of cutting the joists back and sliding the beam into the joists? That's why I think we might be getting confused. When he says beam pocket, I think you're picturing the ends of the beam and what they're sitting on.
Yeah.
And maybe he is saying that. But maybe he's also saying
that the beam itself is going to extend to the...
I'm removing a load-bearing wall, and instead of having a beam pocket, I'd like to place the beam on top of the ceiling joist. So he might be saying instead of cutting them and sliding it in flush with the ceiling joist, I want to put it on top. Is what I'm hoping he's saying.
Well, you'd have to, in that case, need more information. I mean, we need to see what this assembly looks like, because that beam's going to have to go out to bear on something. Yeah, and bearing on the ceiling joist is not an option. Yeah,
well, it can certainly support the ceiling joists, assuming you can make the sizes and everything work correctly. It is possible to hide a beam above the floor. Basically, when you take out a load-bearing wall, you can either put a beam below the ceiling joists and support them. You can put it flush with the ceiling joists and have hangers on the ceiling joists that connect to the beam. Or you can put the beam above the ceiling joists and then have extra deep hangers so that the floor joists are hung off of it, essentially. And we did an article on that, and we can throw the link up to that. And we've probably done an article on all three of those things, and we can throw a link up to it on the show notes page. But you're right. The crucial thing here is what do the ends of the beam bear on? You still have to. They still need to bear on something.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll get lucky and you can extend the beam far enough over that it's hitting a wall that's not part of your plan. Let's say you want to open up a 3-foot doorway and make it a 12-foot opening. Well, then you just need a beam that's a little longer than 12 feet and bears on either side of your opening. And then those loads have to be transferred down continuously all the way down to the basement, and then possibly have to upsize footings for a lolly column. You have to follow that load down and make sure that you're continuous all the way down using squash blocks and some other caveats. Do you guys remember the story? I don't think Matt was here for this, but remember when I was telling the story about putting in doing just this job, opening up a small doorway and putting in a large beam. And for this one, the beam was dropped. It was not cut flush. So the inspector came and he walked in the front door and walked up to the beam, and he was asking me some questions, and he goes, how are you supporting this beam load down in the basement? I said, well, I got squash blocks underneath the floor, transferring the load from these studs down through the subfloor, across the squash blocks, and down to the beam, and then there's a lolly column, within so many inches of it. And he just looks at me, he goes, you know what squash blocks are? And I said, yeah. And he goes, all right, you're all set, and just walked out. Didn't look in the basement, didn't look at anything else I was doing. So apparently, if you impress your inspector with technical knowledge, he'll trust you and he won't bother you anymore. So it's a good tip to know.
Why don't we tell the listenership, people listening, the audience, say what a squash block is, for God's sakes.
Yeah. I thought I just did. It's
you mentioned them, but you didn't say what they were.
It's a squash block is not an item. It's not like you're going to go onto Amazon and buy a squash block. It's simply a piece of blocking that you cut from lumber that is used to carry to fill up the void between the thing that the load you're trying to transfer. So if you have, let's say you enlarge this 3-foot doorway and now it's 12 foot. Well, the ends of that beam bear on usually a couple of studs, and those couple of studs then run down and sit on a bottom plate, and then underneath the bottom plate is your subfloor sheathing, and underneath that is you need to have a support because your floor joists, the space it could be that post lands between two floor joists, and you can't place all of this load on 3/4 inch subfloor between two floor joists. You need to have vertical blocking squash blocks that then transfer it down to a framing member below it.
Yeah,
and usually it's just a couple of 2x.
Or
a few, or however many.
Yeah, and in some applications, I mean, if you're dealing with like I-joists, they require squash blocks under all those point loads anyway. So
yeah,
yep, a little longer. They're basically like tiny little studs that are keeping your joist from getting exploded.
They're like cripples.
Yeah.
Do we even answer this?
Business idea. Squash blocks.
Yeah.
Amazon.com.
It's just two by cutoffs.
Yeah. I'll cut the lumber up for you.
Good thing we record this episode slightly in advance. It gives me time to get my patents in order before this goes live. Squashblocks.com. Josh writes, in a recent episode, I heard you guys discussing some waistline plumbing, and Justin remarked about the shoddy work in question, including both PVC and ABS pipe. This was the question. I don't remember who was on the show that day with me, but this was the question where we had that plumbing in the basement, and we were talking about joining dissimilar pipes. I was saying, by the way, you can't do that. So the question goes on. Maybe this isn't true of all regions, but in my area of New England, they sell both PVC and ABS at all the major retailers. So I guess my question is whether you guys or plumbing pros consider one better than the other. In some areas of the country, this is going to be like, why are we even talking about this? Because you only have PVC to work with, which is the white waste lines for your plumbing system. In a lot of parts of the country, you're going to have white pipes and black pipes and all of the fittings sold side by side, which is what we have here. Is it the same in New York, Matt?
I couldn't even tell you.
Yeah.
Haven't done any plumbing
Haven't gotten there yet?
No.
The short answer is that they're mostly a lot of people attribute things to these two different pipes, like, oh, one's quieter than the other, one's flexible, one's cheaper, one is crap, and the other one's great in quality, and they're considered largely to be interchangeable, though. The big thing that we were talking about when we brought up this question before was that you aren't allowed to switch back and forth between PVC and ABS over and over again. They are different kinds of plastic, and this reminds me of a story. I was at Bosch, at some Bosch event one time, and we were doing this exercise with the company where they were walking us through the development of a tool. And they were like, okay, we're going to invent a tool. And then we came up with like a concept of what the tool was going to do. And then the product manager started firing questions at us like, all right, and how long would the cord be? And like, would it include this in the box? And like, I think it was just kind of illustrating the process of how difficult it is, right? And he's like, and what would it be made out of? Would it be metal? And then we were like, well, this part would be plastic. And the guys were just laughing at us because plastic is just a category. Like it means nothing in their world. It's like, okay, it's like saying, I want to build a house. Let's go. And like, oh my God, there's so many different types. So anyway, you can't assume like, well, it's plastic. It's not cast iron, so it's PVC or ABS. The difference between PVC, ABS, and then CPVC, which pretty much nobody uses anymore, I don't think. Maybe they do, which is like the white rigid supply line plumbing. You used to be able to see it in water heaters and that kind of stuff. Those all require different glues to join them together because they all have different properties, and you can't mix and match those glues, which is why they're color-coded, so you don't mix and match them, and also so the inspector, when he comes, can look at your work and make sure that you used the right glue. The transition cement that takes you from PVC to ABS pipe or vice versa is green, and you can only use it one time. And they mostly have created that. I guess it's a common scenario when you're, because I guess a lot of sewer lines coming from the street are ABS. So if you use PVC in the house, you need to have the special cement that allows you to make that one transition. The only knock that I could find about ABS was that it will warp and distort in the sunlight. And that seems to be not just like a minor complaint. I mean, it seems to be like a legitimate, this is true of ABS. Mm-hmm. So I mean, most plumbing's not exposed to sunlight. So seems like this is largely not a concern, and you can choose either one.
Yeah.
You know, maybe a local plumber would have a different preference, but if they start telling you, well, this one's quieter, this one's stiffer, this one cuts better, it likely doesn't have any real basis except for personal opinion. That said, I forgot to mention that joining them, I guess, ABS is a little easier. It's a one-step cement. PVC, you have to prime it first and then put the solvent cement on.
Yeah.
So I guess that's one thing. Anybody else have anything about ABS, PVC? I kind of hogged that one. Sorry.
Oh. I guess ABS works better in colder conditions. So, I mean, it gets brittle at a much lower temperature. So if there's a risk of this being exposed and knocked into, supposedly that's a better option.
Yeah, PVC is more fragile. But again.
Yeah. I mean, if it's going to get buried, like you know, in underground, I don't think you are really risking anything there.
Right. I remember talking to this one plumber, or reading about this one plumber who goes, yeah, you know, PVC was more brittle. I had an ABS piece and a PVC piece, and if you drop them both, the PVC piece just shatters and the ABS piece breaks cleanly. And then he goes, but it doesn't really matter because they're both broken.
Yeah.
So who cares?
Yeah. Which one's going to be better in a bar fight?
Right. I guess if you're doing, I mean, I guess it's not inconceivable to do outdoor plumbing sometimes, but whatever.
Yeah.
Question numero 4. Garrett writes, I just bought a new house and want to move the location of the washer and dryer. I know my way around plumbing electrical, but I'm curious how you guys would approach sealing the now useless vent penetration. Here's the assembly. It's a standard aluminum flexible vent leading to a plastic vent hood on the exterior, and I have aluminum siding. I can get you a great deal on aluminum siding, Brian. I'm considering just leaving the vent hood in place and sealing it up to keep out critters. Thoughts? Yeah, this is an interesting one. You have now a decommissioned dryer, you have a hole in your house, and it's probably more work to make it look like it was never there than it would be to just seal it up and leave the vent hood.
Yeah, unless there's something I'm missing. I thought right away, because he said aluminum siding.
Yeah.
You just leave it there.
Yeah.
Leave it there for now.
Would you feel the same if it was?
Seal it up.
What other types of siding wouldn't you feel that way on?
Almost anything.
Yeah.
But where are you going to get the piece of aluminum to, even if you could find the aluminum siding that you needed, this house is going to be aluminum siding just faded, right? That stuff's just all a completely different color than it was when it was installed.
Yeah.
You're never going to find something to match.
Yeah.
So, if you could buy the truth is, for me anyway, if everything else being the same, like you didn't want to use this area for anything else, or, why not just let the hood be there and seal it off?
Right.
But if it was wood clapboards or some very easy, or vinyl, some very easy to replace lap siding, then I could see taking it out and just swapping in a couple of new pieces of siding. But with old aluminum siding, just leave it there, seal it up.
I mean, if you had really wide exposure on siding, or if it was coming through like a big trim board or something, I could see you removing it and then popping a plug in there and then smoothing it out. But even then, that plug is probably going to telegraph through the paint job at some point.
You mean if it was an eyesore, its location?
Yeah, or you just were worried
Right.
you want it to close up and pack insulation in there or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I could see to take it out is if the reason that you're moving the washer and dryer is because you don't like the location of the vent.
Right.
Because if it's not an aesthetic thing, then it really doesn't matter. Like, why do you? It doesn't. I can't imagine caring, what your neighbors think about the location of your, dryer vent.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, just
maybe he's worried it's an energy penalty or something.
Right. Well, I mean, you can put a plug in from the inside and then seal around that and insulate.
4 inches, right? 4-inch pipe.
So
It's can of grade stuff.
So that's what you do. You just fill it. Would you plug something in there, and would you seal a vent from the outside so it couldn't be lifted? My concern is that like you have this hood, and then typically under the hood you have a little flapper that opens and closes or it opens when the dryer turns on. So would you seal that flapper closed? Would you put something on so that keep bees or whatever from living under the hood? Because I mean, they're not going to live there when you're using the dryer on a weekly basis because they're going to be constantly blasted out. But as soon as you decommission it, now we got a great place to hang out.
I might, only because...
So maybe that's part of the reason why he's saying, well, should I just get rid of this thing? Is this a problem? So I think there's more to it. It's not as simple as seal it up.
Yeah. Well, take the pipe out, and then you can pack some stuff back behind that vent from the inside so that nothing can really get behind there. And you can probably seal it down some way. I don't know if you can glue it down or whatever, but there are ways to keep those baffles or whatever from opening. And then, cut a round plug of wood or whatever and put it through the whatever that vent went through to begin with, and seal it in with some great stuff and put some insulation behind it.
Yeah, see, I don't think I would even bother with the wood plug. I think this is what I would do. I was thinking about this. I think I would fill up the underside of that hood with foam, with spray foam. I would overfill it so it was billowing out. Like just top it off. After it cured, I would then saw it flush.
Saw it back, yeah.
Saw it flush. And then I would, just put like a quick coat of something on there, primer or exterior paint, doesn't really matter, just protecting it against any UV. And then that foam is good. Possible that critters could want to live in there. So I suppose you could, maybe stick on some kind of a metal screen if you were worried about that.
Yeah, you can actually buy things
you can
that
buy,
go over them. Yeah.
You can buy pest-resistant foam too, or exterior foam even. And then on the inside, I would just shove something into that pipe, really anything. Like it could be a fiberglass bat cut off. It could be a wad of newspaper. Doesn't really matter. You just want something in there that you can spray foam against.
Right.
To give it some body. And,
Well, in your scenario, you've already sprayed from the outside. You've got that flapper shut.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't even need this.
Well, why not recapture the wall insulation, though? Because now you have a 4-inch hole through your wall insulation. So why would I not want to add cavity insulation back where I'm missing it?
Because the great stuff doesn't have the insulating value?
Well, it does, but it's outside.
Aren't you going to... Go on. I thought you were going to foam the inside, too.
Well, that's what I'm doing. I'm foaming the inside of the pipe.
Yeah.
But, so you're saying I don't... Well, how am I going to get the straw all the way back in there, though? Am I cutting it off flush with the wall?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, I'm cutting it off flush with the wall.
Yeah.
Then I'm
Plus you got a foam gun.
Then I'm sticking the straw in there and I'm filling it. All right, that's cool. So you don't need to stuff anything in.
No.
But I would suggest that you fill that pipe up in small bursts. Like fill it up a few inches, not even a few inches, and then let it completely dry and cure, and then come back and do a second layer and maybe a third layer if you need it. Because what happens if you spray foam too deep, the foam on the it's a moisture curing foam, so it will the stuff on the interior closest to where you most recently sprayed will cure first, and it will create an impermeable layer, and then the middle of that giant foam blob you just put in won't be able to cure. It won't expand right. It won't set up and foam and properly and froth and all that stuff. So if you do it in short little lifts, then it will be safer, and you'll get the best use of the foam and the most insulation out of that foam.
Yeah, I've done that, and it's really makes for an interesting texture when you have that foam that doesn't cure.
Oh yeah, it just stays goopy forever.
It just stays goopy. Yeah,
it's like syrupy.
Yeah,
it looks like brown, like a maple syrup. That's it. That's all we got. We cruised through that, guys. We need some more questions for next week, so shoot us some notes at fhbpodcast@taunton.com. Hop on to YouTube and onto our website, findhomebuilding.com/podcast, and check out the show and all the links we're throwing up there for you. Mike does a lot of hard work on that to make sure it's informative and entertaining for you. And, we want to hear from you. We want some feedback. We want you to give us a rating on iTunes and hit that thumbs up button on YouTube and tell your friends. So we'll see you all next week. Until next time, this is Justin for Matt and Brian saying happy building.